The sky above Sarath was burning. Commander Reth stood at the observation window of the last orbital station, his four-fingered hands pressed against the cold glass. Below him, his homeworld was covered in smoke and fire. The beautiful blue oceans now reflected the orange glow of 1,000 burning cities. His people were dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The Keth Dominion had come 3 weeks ago. Their warships had filled the sky like a dark cloud, blocking out the stars. The Orani fleet had fought bravely, but they were not warriors. They were scientists, artists, and farmers. They had built their civilization on peace, not war. And now that peace had destroyed them. Reth watched as another Orani cruiser exploded in the distance. The flash of light hurt his eyes, but he did not look away. Those were his soldiers. His friends. They deserved to be seen in their final moments. "Commander," a young officer called from behind him. "High Speaker Velos wishes to speak with you." Reth turned slowly. His body felt heavy, like he was carrying the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. In many ways, he was. "Connect him." The holographic image of High Speaker Velos appeared in the center of the room. Velos was old, older than anyone Reth had ever known. His skin was wrinkled and gray, and his eyes held the wisdom of 200 years. But today, those eyes held only sadness. "Commander Reth," Velos said, his voice tired. "I have sent messages to every civilization in the galaxy. I have begged for help. I have offered everything we have." "And?" Reth asked, though he already knew the answer. Silence. Velos closed his eyes. "The Galactic Assembly has chosen to do nothing. They are afraid. The Keth are too powerful, they say. No one wants to be next." Reth felt anger rise in his chest. For centuries, the Orani had been good neighbors. They had shared their technology, their medicine, their art. They had helped dozens of species build better lives. And now, when they needed help, everyone had abandoned them. "There must be someone," Reth said. "There is one response," Velos replied, "from a species called humans, from a planet called Earth." Reth frowned. He had heard of Earth. It was a small world in a distant sector, home to a young species that had only discovered faster-than-light travel a century ago. They were considered primitive by galactic standards. Children playing with toys they did not understand. "What did they say?" Reth asked. Velos looked at a screen beside him. 3 words. "We are coming." Reth almost laughed. It was not funny, but what else could he do? The great civilizations of the galaxy had refused to help, and now a species of primitives thought they could save them? "How many ships do they have?" Reth asked. "Intelligence reports suggest their entire navy numbers around 500 vessels," Velos said. "Most are small. They have never fought a war beyond their own solar system." "Then they will die with us," Reth said bitterly. "If they come at all." Far below the burning sky of Sarath, in the cargo hold of a refugee ship, a young girl named Kira sat with her knees pulled to her chest. She was 12 years old, though she looked younger. Her species, the Veleth, were small and delicate, with large eyes that could see in the dark. Those eyes were filled with tears now. The cargo hold was packed with hundreds of refugees. Families huddled together on the cold metal floor. Children cried for parents who would never come. The air smelled of fear and smoke. Kira had lost her parents on the first day of the attack. She had watched their home collapse in flames while she ran for the evacuation shuttle. Now she was alone, surrounded by strangers, waiting for death. The adults spoke in whispers, but Kira could hear them clearly. "The Keth are preparing their final attack," one man said. "By tomorrow there will be nothing left." "Did anyone respond to the distress calls?" a woman asked. "No one. We are alone." "I heard the humans sent a message," another voice said. "They said they would help." The first man laughed, but there was no humor in it. The humans? Those primitives? What can they do against the Keth? They probably do not even know where we are. Kira closed her eyes and pressed her face against her knees. She did not know who the humans were. She did not care. All she knew was that no one was coming. No one ever came. The galaxy was cold and cruel, and the strong destroyed the weak. That was the way of things. 3 days passed. The Keth continued their bombardment, slowly and methodically destroying everything the Orani had built. They were not in a hurry. They enjoyed the suffering. Their commanders watched from their massive warships and laughed as cities fell. Commander Reth had stopped sleeping. He spent every hour at his post, coordinating what little resistance remained. It was pointless, he knew. They had maybe 100 ships left, facing a Keth armada of over 300. But he would not surrender. He would die fighting like a true Orani. On the morning of the 4th day, something changed. A young sensor officer suddenly sat up straight, her eyes wide. "Commander, I am detecting something." Reth walked to her station. "What is it? More Keth reinforcements?" "No, sir." The officer's voice was shaking. "Slip space ruptures on the edge of the system." "How many ships?" The officer was quiet for a long moment. She checked her readings again. Then again. Her hands were trembling. "Officer," Reth said impatiently, "how many ships?" She looked up at him, and there was something in her eyes that Reth had not seen in weeks. Something that looked almost like hope. "Commander," she whispered, "I am counting over 400 vessels. And they are not Keth." Reth grabbed the console and stared at the screen. The readings were impossible. 400 ships had just appeared from nowhere, arranged in perfect formation, and they were heading directly toward Sarath at full speed. "Who are they?" Reth demanded. The officer pressed a few buttons, and a signal filled the room. It was a simple transmission, broadcast on all frequencies. A human voice, calm and clear. "This is Admiral Tae Woo of the Earth United Navy. We received your distress call. We are here to help." Reth could not speak. He could not move. All he could do was stare at the screen as hundreds of human warships raced toward his dying world. The primitives had come, and they had brought an army. Admiral Tae Woo stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Soul, with his hands clasped behind his back. Through the massive view screen, he could see the burning planet of Sarath growing larger as the fleet approached. He could see the Keth warships surrounding it like vultures circling dying prey. He felt no fear, only a cold, quiet anger. "Admiral," his first officer, Captain Hana Siak, said from beside him, "the Keth have detected us. They are moving into defensive formation." Tae Woo nodded slowly. "How long until we reach weapon range?" 12 minutes, sir. Open a channel, all frequencies. I want everyone to hear this." The communications officer pressed a button. "Channel open, Admiral." Tae Woo took a step forward. His voice was calm and steady, like he was discussing the weather. "Attention, Keth Fleet. This is Admiral Tae Woo of the Earth United Navy. You are currently engaged in the murder of innocent civilians. You have exactly 1 chance to withdraw from this system. If you do not leave immediately, we will destroy you. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." He made a cutting motion with his hand, and the channel closed. Captain Hana looked at him with a small smile. "Do you think they will listen?" "No," Tae Woo said. "But I wanted them to know why they are about to die." On the Keth flagship, Supreme Commander Vorath stared at his tactical display in confusion. His second officer stood beside him, equally puzzled. "Humans?" Vorath said the word like it was a joke. "The humans have come to fight us?" "It appears so, Supreme Commander. Our sensors count 437 vessels." Vorath laughed. The sound echoed through the bridge, and his officers laughed with him. "The humans! Those pathetic creatures who still fight among themselves. who have barely learned to leave their own star system. He leaned back in his command chair, still chuckling. This is wonderful. We will crush the Orani and teach these humans a lesson at the same time. 2 victories in one day. Should we respond to their transmission, Commander? Yes. Tell them that we appreciate their offer to surrender, but we do not take prisoners. The message was sent. The Keth waited for a response. None came. On the refugee ship, Kira pressed her face against a small window. Other refugees crowded around her, everyone trying to see what was happening in the sky above. At first, she saw nothing but the familiar shapes of Keth warships. Then she noticed something else. Small dots of light, hundreds of them, moving in perfect formation across the stars. They were far away, but they were getting closer fast. "What are those?" a child beside her asked. "Ships," an old man whispered. "Those are ships, but I have never seen that design before." "They are human ships," someone else said. "The humans actually came." Kira watched the lights grow brighter. She did not understand. Why would strangers come to help them? What did they want? In her short life, she had learned that no one did anything without expecting something in return. But still, she watched. And somewhere deep in her chest, she felt something she had not felt in weeks. It was small and fragile, but it was there. Hope. The 2 fleets met at the edge of Sarath's orbit. The Keth had arranged themselves in a wide crescent formation, their largest ships in the center. It was a classic defensive position, designed to trap enemies in a crossfire. Commander Vorath was confident. His ships were bigger, his weapons were more powerful. These humans would be destroyed in minutes. But as the human fleet drew closer, something strange happened. The human ships did not slow down. They did not spread out to avoid the trap. Instead, they accelerated, flying directly toward the center of the Keth formation at incredible speed. "What are they doing?" Vorath demanded. "Are they insane?" "Sir, they are breaking into smaller groups," his tactical officer reported. 8 ships per group. They are moving in coordinated patterns. On the bridge of the Eternal Soul, Lieutenant Jun Ki sat at his tactical station, his fingers dancing across the controls. He was young, only 26 years old, but he had trained for this moment his entire life. "Wolfpack formations are in position, Admiral," he reported. "All ships ready to engage." Admiral Tae Wu watched the Keth fleet on his screen. He had studied their tactics. He knew their weaknesses. The Keth were bullies. They had spent centuries destroying weaker civilizations. They had forgotten how to fight an enemy that could fight back. Today, they would remember. "All ships," Tae Wu said calmly. "Weapons free." The human fleet opened fire. Commander Vorath had expected a battle. What he got was a massacre. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen. They attacked in small groups, 8 ships working together like a single organism. They would strike a Keth vessel from multiple angles, overwhelming its shields in seconds, then move on to the next target before the Keth could respond. Their weapons were terrifying. Rail guns that fired metal projectiles at a fraction of light speed, plasma torpedoes that burned through armor like paper, missile swarms that seemed to have minds of their own. In the first 5 minutes, the Keth lost 30 ships. "Impossible," Vorath whispered. "This is impossible." "Sir, we are taking heavy losses," his officer shouted. "Our formations are breaking. Then reform them. Fire everything we have." But the humans were too fast. Every time the Keth tried to concentrate their fire, the human ships would scatter and attack from a different direction. It was like trying to fight smoke. On the refugee ship, Kira watched with wide eyes as the battle unfolded above her. She saw Keth warships exploding one after another. She saw human ships dancing through enemy fire, impossibly quick and impossibly brave. She saw the invincible Keth fleet, the force that had destroyed her home and killed her parents, being torn apart by these strange creatures from a distant world. An old woman beside her began to cry. "They came," she sobbed. "They actually came." Kira did not cry. She just watched, unable to look away. The humans were not just fighting, they were winning. Captain Hana Seok commanded her ship, the Avalanche, from the front lines. Her vessel was a heavy cruiser, built for close combat. She had driven it directly into the center of the enemy formation, drawing fire away from the smaller ships. "Hull breach on deck 7, an officer shouted. "Seal it and keep firing," Hana ordered. "We are taking heavy damage." "Captain." "So are they." Hana pointed at the view screen, where a Keth battleship was breaking apart under concentrated fire. "And they are dying faster than we are." The battle lasted 2 hours. By the end, over 200 Keth ships had been destroyed or disabled. The rest were fleeing, their engines burning at maximum power as they ran from the human fleet. Supreme Commander Vorath's flagship was among the survivors, though just barely. Half his ship was in ruins. Admiral Tae Woo watched the enemy retreat. His face showed no emotion. "Should we pursue, Admiral?" Jun Ki asked. "No. Let them go." Tae Woo turned away from the screen. "Let them tell their masters what happened here. Let them tell them what humans do to those who hurt the innocent." He walked to the center of the bridge and looked at his crew. These men and women had traveled 200 light years to fight for strangers. They had bled and died for people they had never met. He had never been more proud. "Begin rescue operations," he ordered. "Launch all shuttles. Get those refugees to safety. Today we save lives." The space battle was won, but the war was not over. On the surface of Sarath, thousands of Keth soldiers still occupied the major cities. They had dug themselves into fortified positions, using civilian buildings as shields. They knew the humans had won in space. They did not care. They would make the invaders pay for every street, every building, every inch of ground. Admiral Tae Woo stood in the command center of the Eternal Soul, looking at a holographic map of the planet below. Red dots marked enemy positions. Blue dots marked the locations of surviving civilians, trapped in the ruins of their own cities. "The Keth have approximately 12,000 ground troops," Lieutenant Jun Ki reported. "They are concentrated in 3 major cities. They have taken civilians hostage." "They think we will not attack if they hide behind innocents," Captain Hana said grimly. "They do not know us very well," Tae Woo replied. He turned to his communications officer. "Get me Sergeant Yuna Park." Seconds later, a woman's face appeared on the screen. Sergeant Yuna Park was 34 years old, with short black hair and sharp eyes that had seen too much death. She commanded the 7th Marine Battalion, some of the best ground soldiers Earth had ever produced. "Sergeant Park," Tae Woo said, "you have been briefed on the situation?" "Yes, Admiral." 12,000 Keth, 3 cities, civilian hostages. Yuna's voice was calm and professional. "What are your orders?" "Free those civilians, Sergeant. Destroy the enemy, and try not to die." Yuna smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Understood, Admiral. We will begin drop in 15 minutes." The drop pods fell from the sky like metal rain. Each pod carried a single soldier, protected by heat shields as they burned through the atmosphere. The Keth looked up and saw hundreds of fiery streaks cutting through the clouds, heading straight for them. By the time they understood what was happening, it was too late. Sergeant Yuna Park hit the ground hard. Her pod crashed through the roof of a destroyed building and buried itself in rubble. She kicked open the door and stepped out into chaos. The city of Arath had been beautiful once. Now it was a graveyard. Buildings were collapsed. Streets were filled with debris. Smoke rose from fires that had been burning for days. Yuna checked her weapon, a standard-issue plasma rifle, and activated her communications. "All units, report." One by one, her soldiers responded. They had landed in a scattered pattern across the city, just as planned. Now they would move toward the center, pushing the Keth back and freeing any civilians they found along the way. "Remember your training," Yuna said. "Move fast, stay low, protect the innocent. Let's show these Keth what Earth soldiers can do." She started running toward the sound of gunfire. Private Dae Sung was 22 years old and terrified. He had joined the military because he wanted to help people. He had trained for years, running through simulations and exercises. But nothing had prepared him for this. The real sounds of battle, the real smell of smoke and blood, the real fear of death around every corner. He pressed his back against a shattered wall, breathing hard. Somewhere ahead, Keth soldiers were firing at his position. He could hear their strange, clicking language as they communicated with each other. "Private," Sergeant Yuna appeared beside him, moving low and fast. "What is your status?" "There are at least 10 of them, Sergeant. In that building across the street, they have heavy weapons." Yuna nodded and pulled out a small device. "Then we go around. Follow me." They moved through the ruins like ghosts, staying in shadows and behind cover. Yuna led them through a collapsed tunnel, then up a pile of debris that gave them a view of the enemy position from above. "On my mark," Yuna whispered. 3, 2, 1, mark." They opened fire at the same time. The Keth never knew what hit them. When the shooting stopped, Dae Sung realized his hands were shaking. Yuna put a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, Private. Keep moving. There are more ahead." In the center of the city, the Keth commander had gathered his remaining forces around a large building. Inside that building were over 500 Orani civilians huddled together in fear. The Keth had placed weapons around the perimeter, daring the humans to attack. "They will not risk the hostages," the commander said confidently. "We will hold here until reinforcements arrive." But reinforcements would never come. The human soldiers surrounded the building from all sides. Snipers took positions on the rooftops. Ground teams prepared to breach. And in the sky above, human gunships waited for the order to strike. Yuna studied the building through her scope. She could see the Keth soldiers inside, moving among the hostages. She could see the weapons they had pointed at innocent people. She had seen this before. On Earth, during the wars of the old days, there had been people who used civilians as shields, terrorists, criminals, cowards. The strategy was always the same, and so was the response. "All teams," Yuna said into her radio, "prepare for breach. On my signal, we go in fast and hard. Shoot only what you can see clearly. Protect the civilians at all costs." She took a deep breath. "Go." The next 60 seconds were controlled chaos. Human soldiers burst through every entrance at once. Flashbang grenades blinded the Keth defenders. Gunfire echoed through the halls as soldiers engaged the enemy at close range. Yuna moved through the building like a force of nature. Her rifle never stopped firing. Every shot was precise, every movement calculated. She had trained for this exact situation 1,000 times. A Keth soldier raised his weapon toward a group of cowering civilians. Yuna shot him before he could pull the trigger. Another tried to run. She shot him too. In less than a minute, it was over. The Keth commander lay dead on the floor, surrounded by his soldiers. The civilians were alive, shocked and crying, but alive. Human medics were already moving among them, treating injuries and offering comfort. Yuna lowered her weapon and looked around the room. Her soldiers were checking bodies, securing weapons, making sure no threats remained. Then she saw her. A young girl, small and thin, with large eyes that reflected the dim light. She was hiding behind an overturned table, watching Yuna with a mixture of fear and wonder. Yuna walked over slowly, holstering her weapon. She knelt down to meet the girl's eyes. "Hey there," she said softly. "It is okay. You are safe now." The girl did not move. "Who are you?" "My name is Yuna. I am from Earth. We came to help." "Why?" It was such a simple question, but it stopped Yuna cold. She thought about it for a moment, searching for the right words. "Because someone had to," she finally said. "And because it was the right thing to do." The girl stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took Yuna's hand. "My name is Kira," she whispered. Yuna smiled. "Nice to meet you, Kira. Let's get you somewhere safe." By sunset, all 3 cities had been liberated. The Keth occupation force had been destroyed. Over 8,000 enemy soldiers were dead, and the rest had surrendered. Human casualties were heavy, nearly 300 killed and twice that many wounded. But every civilian hostage had been saved. Admiral Tae Woo received the report on his bridge. He read the names of the fallen, every single one. These were his people. They had given their lives for strangers on a world far from home. He would make sure they were remembered. "Admiral," Junki said quietly, "Commander Reth is requesting permission to come aboard. He wishes to speak with you." Tae Woo nodded. "Grant permission. I think we have a lot to discuss." He looked out at the planet below. The fires were going out. The smoke was clearing. For the first time in weeks, Sarath was at peace. The humans had kept their promise. They had come to help. The shuttle carrying Commander Reth docked with the Eternal Soul just as the sun set over Sarath. Reth had never been aboard a human ship before. He had expected something primitive, something rough and unfinished. What he found surprised him. The corridors were clean and efficient. The crew moved with discipline and purpose. Everything had a place, and everything was in its place. A young human officer met him at the airlock. "Commander Reth, I am Lieutenant Jun Kai. The Admiral is waiting for you." Reth nodded and followed the young man through the ship. As they walked, he noticed something strange. The human crew looked tired. Many of them had bandages on their arms or faces. Some walked with limps. These people had just fought a terrible battle, had bled and suffered for strangers, and yet they smiled at him as he passed. "Your people," Reth said quietly. "They do not seem angry." Junki glanced at him. "Angry? Why would they be angry? You lost soldiers today. Because of us. Because you came to help us." The young lieutenant was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Commander, every person on this ship volunteered for this mission. They knew the risks. They came anyway." He paused. "On Earth, we have a saying. There is no greater love than to give your life for another. Those soldiers did not die for nothing. They died so that others could live. That is something to be proud of, not angry about." Reth did not know how to respond. In his culture, soldiers fought for territory, for resources, for power. The idea of fighting simply to save strangers was difficult to understand. The door to the Admiral's quarters opened, and Reth stepped inside. Admiral Tae Woo stood by a window looking out at the stars. He was older than Reth had expected, with gray in his hair and lines on his face. But his eyes were sharp and clear, the eyes of a man who had seen much and learned from all of it. "Commander Reth," Tae Woo said, turning to face him. "Please, sit down." Reth sat in a chair across from the Admiral's desk. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I must thank you," Reth finally said. "What you did today, what your people did, I do not have words for it." Tae Woo shook his head. "No thanks are necessary, Commander. We did what anyone should have done." "But no one else did." Reth's voice cracked slightly. "We sent messages to every civilization in the galaxy. We begged for help, and everyone turned away. Everyone except you." Tae Woo sat down across from him. "I know. We heard about that. To be honest, Commander, it made us angry. There are dozens of species out there with fleets larger than ours. Any one of them could have helped. But they chose not to. They were afraid of the Keth. Fear is not an excuse." Tae Woo's voice hardened. "When innocent people are dying, you do not get to be afraid. You do not get to look away and pretend it is not your problem. You act. You help. That is what it means to be civilized." Reth leaned forward. Admiral, I have been a soldier for 60 years. I have fought many battles, seen many things, but I have never seen anything like what your people did today. The way your ships fought, the way your soldiers moved, it was like nothing I have ever witnessed. We have had practice, Tae-Woo said simply. Practice? Humans have been fighting wars since the beginning of our history, Commander. We have fought each other over land, over religion, over ideas. We have developed weapons that could destroy our own planet. We have come close to extinction more than once. He paused. But we have also learned. We have learned that the greatest enemy is not the one across the battlefield. It is the darkness inside ourselves, the fear, the hatred, the indifference. We fight those enemies every day. Reth shook his head slowly. Your species is very strange, Admiral. Tae-Woo smiled. I know. We confuse ourselves sometimes. There was a knock at the door, and High Speaker Velos entered. He was old and frail, supported by 2 assistants, but when he saw Tae-Woo, he pushed them away and stood on his own. Admiral Tae-Woo, Velos said, I wish to speak with you personally. Tae-Woo stood and offered his hand. Velos looked at it for a moment, confused, then took it. The human grip was firm but gentle. High Speaker, Tae-Woo said, I am honored. Velos sat down heavily. His eyes were wet with tears he was trying to hide. I am 212 years old, he said. I have led my people for almost a century. I have seen wars and plagues and disasters, but I have never seen anything like today. He looked directly at Tae-Woo. Why did you come? You asked for help. So did many others, over the years. Help never came for them either. Tae-Woo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. High Speaker, when I was a young man, there was a great disaster in my country. An earthquake destroyed entire cities. Thousands of people were trapped in the rubble, dying slowly. And do you know what happened? Velos shook his head. People came from everywhere. From other countries, other continents. They flew across the world to dig through rubble with their bare hands. They did not know the people they were saving. They did not speak the same language or share the same beliefs, but they came anyway because that is what humans do. When someone is suffering, we help. It is in our nature. But we have nothing to offer you, Velos said. We cannot repay this debt. We have no resources, no strategic value. Why would you sacrifice your soldiers for us? Because it was right. Tae-Woo leaned forward. High Speaker, there is no debt. We did not come for payment. We did not come for resources or territory or power. We came because your people were dying, and we had the power to stop it. That is the only reason that matters. Velos stared at him. Tears were now flowing freely down his wrinkled face. In all my years, he whispered, I have never met a species like yours. On the surface of Serath, human medical teams worked through the night. Doctors and nurses from Earth treated alien patients with injuries they had never seen before. They improvised, adapted, and learned on the fly. When they did not know how to help, they asked the Irani doctors and worked together. Sergeant Yuna Park spent most of the night helping with refugee coordination. She directed traffic, organized supplies, and carried wounded civilians on her own back when there were not enough stretchers. Around midnight, she found a quiet corner and sat down to rest. Her body ached. Her uniform was covered in blood and dust. But she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Peace. A small figure appeared beside her. It was Kira, the young girl she had rescued from the building. You should be sleeping, Yuna said gently. Kira shook her head. I cannot sleep. I keep seeing the kith. Yuna understood. She had the same problem herself sometimes. The faces of enemies, the sounds of battle. They stayed with you, even when you wanted them to go. Come here, she said, and Kira sat down beside her. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars through a gap in the ruined ceiling. Yuna, Kira said quietly. Will you stay? On Sarath? Yuna shook her head. I cannot. I have to go back to Earth eventually. There are other people who might need help. Kira's face fell. Oh. Yuna put an arm around the girl's shoulders. But that does not mean we cannot stay in touch, and who knows? Maybe someday you will visit Earth. Kira looked up at her with those large, hopeful eyes. Do you think so? I think anything is possible. Yuna smiled. After all, a month ago no one thought humans would come to save Sarath, and here we are. Kira smiled, too, the first real smile Yuna had seen from her. Here we are, she repeated softly. Across the galaxy, news of the Battle of Sarath spread like wildfire. Species that had ignored the Orani's pleas watched in shock as a young, primitive species accomplished what no one else would attempt. The humans had crossed 200 light-years, destroyed one of the most feared fleets in the galaxy, and asked for nothing in return. The Keth Dominion received word of the defeat. Their supreme leader demanded answers. When the surviving officers told him what had happened, he did not believe them. Impossible, he said. The humans are children. They could not have done this. But they had. And everything was about to change. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Sarath. The planet had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The ruined cities were being rebuilt, but not just by Orani hands. Human engineers worked alongside alien workers, sharing technology and ideas. Medical centers used a combination of Earth and Orani science. Schools taught children in both languages. The scars of war were still visible. Some buildings could not be repaired. Some lives could not be brought back. But there was hope now, real hope, and it showed in the faces of everyone who walked the new streets of Sarath. Commander Reth stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the capital city. He was older now, his hair graying at the edges, but his eyes were still sharp, still alert. It is beautiful, is it not? A voice said behind him. Reth turned to see High Speaker Velos approaching slowly. The old leader used a walking stick now, but he refused to be carried anywhere. It is, Reth agreed. Better than before in some ways. Velos stood beside him and looked out at the city. I never thought I would see this day. When the Keth came, I was certain we were finished. Our civilization, our history, everything we had built over thousands of years. I thought it would all be destroyed. And then the humans came. Yes, Velos smiled softly. The humans came. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sun rise over the rebuilt skyline. I received word from Earth this morning, Velos said. The Galactic Council has officially offered humanity a permanent seat. Reth raised an eyebrow. That is fast. It usually takes decades for new species to be considered. These are not usual times. Velos turned to face him. The galaxy is watching humanity, Commander. What they did for us, it has changed things. Species that would never have considered allying with each other are reaching out to Earth. The Keth Dominion has pulled back from 3 contested sectors. The balance of power is shifting. Because of one battle? Because of what that battle represented. Velos placed a hand on Reth's shoulder. For centuries, the strong have dominated the weak. That has been the rule of the galaxy. But the humans showed us another way. They proved that strength can be used to protect, not just to conquer. That is a lesson the galaxy needed to learn. On Earth, in a small apartment in Seoul, Jun-Ki sat with his mother at the kitchen table. His mother was small and gray-haired, with the kind of face that had seen too much worry. But today, she was smiling. She had been smiling since her son came home. Commander Jun-Ki, she said, reading the name on his new uniform. My little Jun-Ki, a commander. Your father would be so proud. Jun-Ki felt his eyes sting. His father had been a soldier, too. killed in action when Jun-Ki was only 12. It was the reason he had joined the military to continue his father's legacy. "I was scared, Mother," he admitted. "When we jumped into that system, when I saw how many Keth ships there were, I was terrified." His mother reached across the table and took his hand. "But you did not run." "No. I thought about what Father would have done. He would have stayed. He would have fought." Jun-Ki looked down at their joined hands. "So that is what I did. You are a good man, my son. Your father is watching from somewhere, and he is proud. I am sure of it." Jun-Ki squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Mother." Later that day, he received a message. There was a ceremony at the Galactic Council headquarters in 3 weeks. Humanity would officially take its seat among the elder races. Admiral Tae-woo had personally requested that Jun-Ki attend. He smiled as he read the message. A year ago, he had been a junior officer on his first real mission. Now he was going to witness history. Life was strange sometimes. In a school in Seoul, a young girl named Kira was struggling with her homework. Korean was a difficult language to learn. The characters were strange, the grammar was confusing, and no matter how hard she tried, she could not seem to get it right. Some of the other children laughed at her mistakes, but there were others who helped. Her classmate Min Soo sat beside her, patiently explaining the differences between words. Her teacher, an older woman named Ms. Che, always had extra time after class to help her practice. And then there was Yuna. Sergeant Park had officially adopted Kira 6 months ago. It had taken a long time to arrange, lots of paperwork and interviews and legal procedures. But Yuna had never given up. She had promised to keep Kira safe, and she meant it. Now Kira lived in a small apartment in Seoul. She had her own room, with a bed and a desk and a window that looked out at the city lights. Sometimes she still had nightmares about the war. Sometimes she woke up crying, afraid that the Keth would come again. But Yuna was always there. She would sit with Kira until the fear passed, telling her stories about Earth, about the mountains and the oceans and the strange creatures that lived there. She would make hot chocolate, and they would watch the sunrise together. "Kira," Yuna said that evening, looking over her homework, "you are getting better. Look, you got most of these right." Kira looked at her paper doubtfully. "There are still many mistakes." "Mistakes are how we learn." Yuna smiled. "When I was your age, I was terrible at math. I failed 3 tests in a row, but I kept trying, and eventually I figured it out." "Really?" "Really. The only way to truly fail is to stop trying." Kira thought about that. It was a very human way of thinking. In her old life, before the war, failure was something to be ashamed of. You did not talk about your weaknesses. You hid them. But humans were different. They talked about their failures openly. They learned from them. They got back up when they fell down. It was one of the many things she was learning to admire about them. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Admiral Tae-woo had ever seen. It was a massive dome, large enough to hold thousands of representatives from hundreds of species. The walls were covered with screens showing the faces of those attending virtually. The air was filled with the sound of dozens of languages being translated simultaneously. Tae-woo stood at the center of the chamber, dressed in his formal uniform. Beside him were Captain Hana Seok, Commander Jun-Ki, and Sergeant Yuna Park. They had been chosen to represent humanity at this historic moment. High Speaker Velo stood at the podium, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. "For thousands of years," Velo said, "this council has governed the galaxy. We have created laws, resolved disputes, and maintained peace among our members. We have prided ourselves on our wisdom and our fairness." He paused, and his eyes found Tae-woo in the crowd. "But 1 year ago, we failed. When the Orani Confederation faced destruction, this council did nothing. We were afraid. We made excuses. We told ourselves it was not our problem. And we were wrong." The chamber was silent. Many of the representatives looked uncomfortable. Then the humans came, Velos continued. A young species, barely a century into interstellar travel. They had nothing to gain and everything to lose. But they came anyway, because they believed it was right. They fought for strangers. They bled for strangers. They died for strangers. He turned to face the full council. Today, we offer humanity a seat on this council. Not because of their military power, though that is considerable. Not because of their technology or their resources. We offer them a seat because they have shown us what true strength looks like. True strength is not the power to destroy. It is the courage to protect, the willingness to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. Velos looked at Tae-Woo again. Admiral, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I ask you, will humanity accept this seat? Tae-Woo stepped forward. The eyes of 1,000 species were upon him. He thought about his crew, his soldiers, the people who had given their lives. He thought about the refugees they had saved, the children who now had a future because someone cared enough to fight for them. High Speaker, he said, his voice calm and clear. Humanity accepts. We accept this seat not as a reward but as a responsibility. We will stand with this council against tyranny. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. And we will never, ever turn away when someone asks for help. The chamber erupted in applause. Later that night, Tae-Woo visited the memorial on Sarath. It was a simple structure, a wall of black stone with names carved into its surface. Human names and Orani names, side by side. The soldiers who had fallen together were remembered together. He read each name slowly, touching the stone with his fingers. These were his people, his responsibility. They had trusted him to lead them, and some of them had paid the ultimate price. They did not die for nothing, a voice said behind him. He turned to see Yuna standing there, with Kira beside her. I know, Tae-Woo said, but that does not make it easier. Yuna nodded. She understood. Kira stepped forward and placed a small flower at the base of the memorial. It was a traditional Velith gesture of respect. Thank you, she said quietly to the wall of names. Thank you for coming. Tae-Woo watched her for a moment. This girl, this small survivor, was the reason they had come. Not for glory or power or recognition, for people like her. He placed his hand on her shoulder. We will always come, he said. That is what humans do. The sun set over Sarath, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The memorial stood in the fading light, a reminder of sacrifice and hope. The galaxy had changed. The humans had made sure of that, and this was only the beginning.